Welcome to the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Vantage Circle, the simple and AI-powered rewards and recognition platform for employee engagement.
What makes employees happy? What do they really want? Is there a hype about employee happiness? Do you think workplace happiness is overrated? What are the obstacles that leaders face while keeping their employees happy and engaged? We'll answer all these questions today in our episode of the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. I'm Sushmita, and today with me I have the guest speaker, Dr. Elia Gourgouris. Dr. Elia is the president of the Happiness Center, an organization of world's leading experts in the field of positive psychology, dedicated to creating personal success and happiness. Welcome to the show, Elia.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
Thanks for joining me. Yeah, so we spend a lot of time at work in the workplace, and I believe it can be a huge downer, if we aren't happy to be there. So you have given this a lot of thought already, Elia. How do you see this as a very important matter and help others try to understand that better?
I think happiness at work is probably one of the most important aspects in our lives because, like you said, Susmita, we spend an extraordinary amount of time throughout our lifetime, decades at work. So if we spend it miserably, we're going to be miserable in our life outside of work too. If we have a positively engaged workforce, obviously that's going to impact our personal lives as well.
Right. So I have a lot of nitty-gritty questions for you about employee happiness today, but just to get started, my first question is the most simple one to ask, but probably a little difficult one to answer. And that is, what makes employees happy? What do they really want? I mean, we know that it totally differs from person to person, but there must be some common things that we can't miss mentioning here.
Yeah. And as believe it or not, their salaries is not at the top of the list. It usually comes in fourth or fifth. What makes employees happy is, number one, I think, is a great employer, someone that expresses appreciation. Obviously, when employees feel appreciated and seen, I guess, quote unquote, if you could, quote unquote, they feel welcomed at work. They feel like they matter. I think that's usually at the top of the list. The other thing is that their work within an organization, that they have an opportunity to grow and to learn new things and to advance. In other words, they're not stuck at a position for the next 5 or 10 years, but that their work gets rewarded. They have opportunities to grow, and the actual physical work environment is important as well. And, those are some of the things that make employees happy. There's a lot more than that, and we can discuss as we go on.
Right. So there is this famous quote that says that people work for money, but go extra mile for recognition, praise, and rewards. So what do you think, what is the role of rewards and recognition that it plays in employee happiness?
We have to remember that regardless of the title or the position any person has within an organization, in the end, we're all human beings, right? And we have feelings. And human beings, when they do a good job, like to be rewarded, whether it's verbally or whether it's through other means that each organization has to reward them. It just makes people feel better. I know this is common sense, but it's not often common practice. And this may seem almost too simple, like, well, we all know that. Yes, we do know that, but we don't put it into effect consistently throughout organizations. And the companies that actually do that obviously have happier and more well-engaged employees.
Right. Okay. So what kind of rewards and recognition do they like? Recognition, we understand that it's, praising someone. But when it comes of rewards, like what rewards do you think plays the best role? What kind of rewards?
I think sometimes even a gift card, you do a good job and somebody says, what's your favorite restaurant? Like it's very targeted rewards. So like what is or maybe it's a card that,
gift cards or
gift cards. Yes. That's an easy one. I think some other rewards are maybe, why don't you take the day off tomorrow and like almost the unexpected stuff that you don't really like. You've done such a great job today. Take the day off tomorrow and do something for yourself. Don't answer any emails, do something you enjoy and then come back refreshed and renewed, the day after. obviously more vacation time if that's possible.
Right, right.
As you know, there are a lot of companies that are switching to like almost unlimited vacation time nowadays. So that's something that's been implemented as of late, with mixed results, I have to say, though.
Yeah, but that is, I don't know how, how good that will be for employers. I mean, it sounds a little difficult for employers, right? Unlimited holidays.
Well, what's funny about that is that employees actually are not taking that time. They're actually taking less time than they are before because they're afraid if they take too much time off, then they'll be dispensable and they'll be replaced. So even though in the books, according to HR, you have unlimited, vacation time off, employees are not actually taking those. It's a very interesting psychological, because you think if you had unlimited time off, you would take it and use it.
Then when someone gives that to you, you are like, you don't take it maybe, right?
Yeah, there's a reluctance
I'd like
to use it too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a reluctance. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, what do you have to say about the hype about employee happiness? I mean, do employers really care about that? I mean, do you think it is, or the term, workplace happiness is overrated?
I definitely don't think it's overrated. I mean, I could categorically tell you that employee happiness is one of the most important things within, whether it's a profit or non-profit organization. And why is that? I mean, let's discuss why employee happiness is important. Number one, happy employees tend to be obviously more productive. They're more innovative and they're more creative. They're better teammates. And people have asked me, I said, Dr. Elia, why do you say that? Is because when we take care of ourselves and our batteries are full and we practice, great self-care, we have enough energy and to help somebody else. So we make better teammates, which means that we have stronger teams, which means when we have stronger teams, we have a more collaborative and creative and productive environment, which means in the end, it's more profitable. I mean, everything leads to everything else. The other thing that actually very few people notice is that happy employees are physically healthier. Now, I want you to think about that in terms of the cost. When you have employees who are sick a lot physically or who have to take, days off because of their mental health and so on. So happy employees are physically healthier, and that also adds to the bottom line. And that's something that people rarely talk about.
Yeah. So, there must be some obstacles, right, in keeping your employees happy and engaged. Like, as you mentioned about mental health of employees. So that is, I think, more difficult than maintaining, keeping a person, physically happy and physically engrossed in a job. So there must be some obstacles for the employers. How do one overcome those?
So here's what's interesting in the COVID world, for the last almost 2 years now, we have seen the workforce be upended, right, across the globe, and regardless of industry and size of company, profit or nonprofit. I wrote a book in the middle of the pandemic called 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis. And initially, and I co-wrote it with my good friend Konstantinos Apostolopoulos. I have to give him credit for it because I wouldn't be able to do it without him. But initially, we wrote the book for consumers. We wanted to get this book out, and we got it out in May of 2020. So it was the first book to market in the world, and we got it out. Initially, we wrote it for, just for everyday people to help them, because we could see there was a multitude of crises coming to the world besides COVID. What we didn't anticipate, and I want to say back in June of 2020, after the initial lockdown, as companies began to emerge after the first wave,
right,
companies reached out to us and said, our employees are traumatized, they're scared, they're depressed, they're anxious, just basically they're stressed out, right? And we don't know what to do. Can you help us? So we were hired, and we continue to be hired by organizations that say, help us with our employees' engagement and their happiness. It turns out that the biggest challenge facing organizations in the world, and this comes from a study of, thousands of HR directors and professionals, is this: how do you maintain the physical and mental well-being of your employees while battling, this global pandemic. And I feel like a lot of companies have done, I would say, a pretty decent job of the physical aspect of that. Meaning, obviously, they've provided masks and they provided a hybrid work place, work from home as much as you can. Or even if they're meeting physically, that there's spacing. There's some physical. I think that from that aspect, they've done a fairly decent job. Part of it because it was mandated. So there's obviously government, mandates. However, they have not done a great job at ensuring the mental well-being of their employees. If you look at the United Nations, and this goes back, even to last year, we have billions and billions of people who are suffering from stress, anxiety, and depression. Mind you, these are people that did not have a pre-existing condition, meaning that this is, it's a direct result of the pandemic. You have billions of people who are feeling, so there's a mental health crisis that's huge, right? I think it even more damaging than the pandemic itself. You have the financial crisis where you have, tens of millions of people have been unemployed and hundreds of millions underemployed, and there's billions of people feeling financially insecure, meaning I don't know how I'm going to take care of my family or myself. So there's that crisis as well. So as human beings, we're very resilient. We've handled crises before in our lives, and I'm not counting people's individual crises at this time, right? Like going through a divorce or having a relationship issue, or, having a sick child, or having to take care of an elderly parent that suffers from, dementia or Alzheimer's. We're not even talking about those things. So human beings were very resilient, and so are employees, right? We can handle one or two crises, but we can't handle multiple crises happening at the same time with no end in sight. So as a result of that, that is a huge obstacle for employers to try to keep their employees happy and engaged. I mean, because that's a global thing. That's not specific to a country or to an industry or to a size of company. So, and so the second challenge that organizations have is, how do we maintain employee engagement, productivity, and effectiveness in the midst of all this? Well, guess what? That's the number two challenge. You're not going to solve that until you solve the first challenge, which is how to ensure the mental well-being of our employees. So part of that, and specifically, if you look at from an HR perspective, because I work with a lot of senior HR leaders in organizations, it's no longer enough to ask, your team, your employees, how are you doing? Because most of them are actually not going to tell you the truth. Right? And especially when you're doing all your meetings through via Zoom, when you're physically not able to like touch, see, and make eye contact, and feel the energy in the room, right? So as senior leaders, we have to change ourselves. I think the responsibility lies on leaders to show up differently. What do I mean by that? Imagine that this, you're on a Zoom call with your team. If you ask them how they're doing, you're going to get nothing, silence, or you're going to get a mumbled fine, like if things are fine, which isn't true. You have to lean into the camera, like get your eyes into the camera deeply and say, Susmita, how are you really doing? And how is your family? And how are your loved ones? How are the kids? Like make it much, much more personal and show real empathy and real concern. And is there anything that I can do as your leader? Is there anything the company can do? Or the organization? What can we do to help and make this transition, working from home or working under these very difficult circumstances, better? And the extra credit, and this is where it requires great emotional intelligence from a leader, is this: when you're leaning into the camera and you're asking those questions, be transparent. Practice what I call hot communication, meaning honest, open, and transparent communication. And what that looks like is this: you look into the camera and you say, and by the way, it's been really hard in my home too. I have, our kids haven't gone to school for 9 months. It's really stressing us out. Like, be vulnerable and real as a leader, because then you're basically saying, we're all in this together. I feel your pain. I understand your concern. And so what can we do collectively together to move forward? That's the type of leadership that's required right now. People don't want to have like, oh, we replace potato chips with apples, so we have a little healthier workforce, or, let's go and stretch for half an hour, and that'll make you happier. That's not enough anymore. We have to raise our own bar as leaders. And as we do, and we are consistent throughout the organization, we're actually then showing our employees, you know what, you matter to me. So we have to communicate much, much more clearly. We have to communicate our expectations clearly. And I know this may sound a little funny, but basically we have to show our employees that we care and we actually love them, that they're not just a number, in the organization that we want to use and then discard. So if I'm going to ask you to work, an extra, 10 hours this week, explain the why behind that. It's not because I want my company to be more profitable so we can, hit the margins and make bonuses. It's because if we don't hit certain numbers, I may have to lay off 10% of my workforce. And my workforce is like a family, and I don't want to lay anybody off. So as a result of that, I'm asking everybody to step up a little bit more, because the revenues have been down for the last year, obviously because of the pandemic, and we're trying to make that up. It's not because I'm greedy. It's because I want to preserve livelihoods and I want to preserve people's jobs. If you explain that to people and you're transparent that way and say, this is the reason why, believe me, they will work harder for you as a result of that. But you have to explain the why. Does that make sense?
Right, exactly. So, so the whole thing is that leadership has stepped up, right? It has become
Well, they need to step up. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So, Elia, you have helped thousands of people now, both personally and professionally, now achieve happiness, prosperity, and wellness as the president of the Happiness Center, which is a premier international professionals association in the field of positive psychology. Do your research and experience prove that people's lives get better all around if they're happy and perform well at work?
Yes, there's no question about it. I've been working with people for 35 years. The first half of my career as a clinical psychologist, and then I switched over to the corporate side as an executive coach and leadership training and development. And my experience has been that when you have a person that's content and happy at work, imagine what they're like when they go home and what impact that has on the home. Usually when we talk about, somebody comes home from work, they're tired, they're exhausted, they're cranky, they might be angry or whatever. And they bring that energy into the home, and then it impacts the rest of the family, right? For the rest of the evening. Imagine what would it be like if we had a positive experience at work. We were engaged, connected, felt like we made impact in a positive light, right? Now we go home, we're driving and we go home and we open the door and, our loved ones say, how was work today? Instead of grumbling or being upset or being, ticked off, we say, actually, I had a great day at work today. And let me tell you what happened. And you bring that kind of energy and excitement into your own home with the people that you love and care the most. Imagine how impactful that is. Number one, to your own inner circle, but how great that would be for our society as a whole.
Very true.
Because usually that's not what happens. People come, oh, work was so hard. I can't, it's always people complaining when they come home. I hate my work, that guy's so stupid. They did that, they're all, my boss is an idiot. It's kind of this negativity, right? Well, that also, because it's, human beings are all about energy. Well, that energy is negative, and that negatively impacts your most intimate environment. Well, imagine if the opposite was true, how great that would be.
Very true. Yeah, right. So, coming to the next question, Elia, what are some of the ways that we may use technology to improve employee happiness and learn more about what's going on in the workplace?
So I'm not a technology expert. I actually claim that I'm, technology inept in a lot of ways. That's one of my biggest weaknesses. I know people very well inside and out. I don't know technology very well. But I think since a large portion of the workforce has needed to work remotely, I think technology has become even more and more important.
Very important.
The fact that we're able to have now meetings, with people working from different parts of the world, and we can all get together via Zoom or via, other means, and it seems to be relatively effective. I know people are saying we're having Zoom fatigue, and I can add myself to that as well.
Yeah,
It's still
most of
the
us can, I
reach.
guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and people, of course, want to meet, face to face and in live and in person. However, there's still some people that are reluctant to come into work. There are several companies that have said, we're not going to have people come in until 2022. This whole thing has lasted way longer than anybody has anticipated, and so there's a huge, we're all tired, fatigued, right? We're just. But technology has allowed us to continue to work, and I believe that the future of work, it will be a hybrid,
Right.
meaning that people have recognized and leaders have recognized that, first of all, I think it's cost effective in a lot of ways. If people working from home, is it going to be full time like that? I don't think so, but there's going to be maybe coming into work 2 or 3 days a week,
Yeah.
And the main thing to me is communicate your expectations clearly. And then trust that your employees actually will do the work, even though they're not being supervised all the time. In other words, treat them like adults and treat them like they care and that they matter and that you trust them to get the work done. To me, as a leader, I don't care if you're in front of your computer 8 or 10 hours a day. What I care is the outcome, right? That's what, if you get it done in 4 hours and you meet the deadline,
Right.
I don't care if you go and play with your kids afterwards, or if you go for a walk or you go to the gym.
That's so nice.
It's not,
Yeah,
does that make sense? Because
very much. Yeah.
otherwise, we're not here to babysit our, each employee and check, well, how long was their computer open? Were they in front of the screen for this? No, that means you don't trust your employees. And as you know, the employees will rise to whatever level, you trust them. I really believe that. If you trust that they're doing a good job and an honest job and they perform and they deliver on time, if they do it faster than the 8 hours, well, good for them. I would tell them take the rest of the day off and go and do something that matters to you and fills your bucket.
Yeah, we also hear that some employers track the employees' keyboard and mouse activities, and the employees also, keep different tricks to keep the laptops active. So I think these are very small things, but very major concerns when it comes to trust between employers and employees.
Yeah, but that's like playing cat and mouse with your employees. I feel like that's a very unhealthy environment if that's what you're doing, because that's the opposite of trust.
Very much.
Because you're showing that you're working, maybe when you're not working. We want people to be engaged, to be connected, to be innovative, and to be more productive. But I feel like when you expect the best from people actually show up for the most part, and they don't cut corners. As a matter of fact, they work even harder because they feel appreciated, they feel loved, they feel supported by senior leadership.
That is what, trust is a very important factor in employee happiness, right?
Well, absolutely. Because otherwise, why are you hiring these people if you don't trust them? And if you're saying you don't trust them, then they don't trust you. Because that's then you're going to this negative spiral.
Yeah. Okay. So finally, Elia, what will be your suggestion to our HR listeners today?
Well, like I've shared before with you, I think HR leaders need to themselves show up differently and practice that hot communication, honest, open, and transparent. And not just go through the motions and just ask, well, how are things going? Because most folks are not going to be honest with that. They need to be open and vulnerable and say, I'm kind of struggling myself. Like, be real, basically, as an HR leader, and show that kind of vulnerability. That's what's expected nowadays. Because if employees feel like, well, looks to me like your life is perfectly fine, while my life here at home is falling apart, there's a huge disconnect between the two. Versus saying, yeah, we're all in this together. I'm struggling, my family's struggling too. So what can we do to better our lives and to help one another? And in other words, that leadership and employees, there's a connectivity between the two. And we have this feeling like we're all in this together.
Right.
And I heard this great quote. We may not all be on the same boat, but we're all in the same storm, right? So the same boat means we're not all in the same exact circumstances, because people's circumstances are different. But globally, I think we're all in the same storm because we've all been impacted. I don't know one person that has not been impacted by what's happened in the last year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah, right. Very true. Okay, so finally, how can our listeners reach out to you?
LinkedIn is probably the best way to, Elia Gourgouris, PhD, the happiness doctor. You can reach me through there. That's probably the best way to, and I would love to connect with your audience if you have any more questions. Or again, I work with organizations across the globe, really expanding in India, actually, the last year. That's one of the blessings of technology that the sphere of influence has grown a lot in Europe and India.
Okay.
I've done multiple webinars and seminars there, and there's a movement of in trying to understand the importance of happiness for employees, and I'm just happy to share that because I'm very passionate about happiness, as you can tell. I mean, that's I spend my entire life focusing on people's happiness, both on the personal and professional levels.
Brilliant. Okay, so that was really great to talk to you, Elia, and thank you so much for all the insights. We hope to get you back soon here, and thanks a lot for joining me in the Vantage HR Influencers podcast.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Vantage HR Influencers podcast. Please do subscribe to Vantage HR Influencers podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and our YouTube channel for new episodes.